Alright, what's going on, people? It is the Midwest Swing Podcast and Periscope chat. Brandon Moore here, coming to you after a Twins win on Tuesday night at US Cellular Field. We got a 4-1 victory, and the Twins now up 2-1 in the 5-game series. I've rarely seen 5-game series that is coming at you due to the fact that there was a doubleheader yesterday, which the Twins split. So it has been obviously a very good series for the Twins so far on the south side of Chicago. And hopefully, at this point they can get 4 out of 5. Some news coming out of the south side of Chicago tonight, as we've got Tim Melville designated for assignment. He is going to be off the roster. John Curtis, it sounds like, via Rhett Bollinger of MLB.com, Mike Biardino of the St. Paul Pioneer Press, saying that he's coming up. So he will join the Twins in the bullpen in Chicago on Wednesday. We'll have a quick wrap-up or write-up for him on zonecoverage.com here after the Periscope chat is done. Again, thanks for joining us, Midwest Swing Podcast and Periscope. So if you are checking us out on the YouTube channel or on Periscope itself, thank you for checking us out. If you would like to interact on the program, feel free to set up questions on TweetDeck at Brandon_Warren. Those are easier for me to answer. I can answer them on the app, but it is more difficult because I'm using a smaller phone and they disappear in a few seconds. And so when I'm riffing too, I am not memorizing them up here. So if you want to get involved, please send them to me on Twitter at Brandon_Warren. I can sense that the excitement level for John Curtis is going to be palpable. This is a guy who had a phenomenal run at Chattanooga to start the season, has also been very, very good at AAA Rochester, and is now being added to the 40-man roster. Again, will join the team in Chicago tomorrow, as they have now decided that Dylan G will start on Saturday. So lots of fun stuff going on. Dylan G obviously pitched well in the nightcap of Monday night's doubleheader and has probably deserved to get a longer look in the rotation. Not exactly a dominating performance. Again, the Chicago offense is not particularly good, and he only had, I want to say it was 5 swinging strikes on like 84 pitches. So not an overpowering performance, but it is pretty much what you get from Dylan G at his best. So he will get a longer look. I suspect that will be at least until Adalberto Mejia is ready to come back. And if Mejia is not ready to come back until September and G settles in, Mejia could come back as a left-handed reliever, at least to wrap up the season. So it'll be interesting to see what the situation dictates moving forward with how the Twins are going to manage all these pitchers. But again, Tim Melville, designated for assignment, did not pitch particularly well in the first game of the doubleheader on Monday. I suspect he'll probably clear waivers and stay inside the organization, but the numbers at AAA were good enough that maybe another team will give him a look, especially a team that's way out of it or a team that's grasping for starting pitchers right now. Obviously, we saw the Philadelphia Phillies sign Henderson Alvarez today to a minor league deal. So there are teams out there who are looking for help. So again, if Melville is to get picked up off waivers, it wouldn't stun me, but I do still think he's probably going to clear and get sent to AAA Rochester. But we'll know more about that here in the near-term future. Again, 4-1 win. Kyle Gibson looked very good tonight on the south side at Guaranteed Rate Field. The biggest thing with Gibson's start tonight, and I think this is something you have to think about when you want him gone, is that these are the kind of starts you panic about. If you're going to get rid of Kyle Gibson, you worry that this is the kind of thing he is capable of and is going to do the second he leaves the Twins. Because this is a tall guy, athletic, good sinker, good slider, throws fairly hard. When you have a guy who can do all those things fairly well but is just not executing, most of the time there is a fix in there that someone will be able to find. Rick Anderson didn't really have the ability to find it. Neil Allen so far has not been particularly adept at finding it, but the physical tools for Kyle Gibson are in place for him to be a successful pitcher in the major leagues, and I do have to believe that someone out there will think that they can get him to where he needs to be. He's only going to be 30 at the end of the season, and frankly, Mike Pelfrey keeps getting contracts. This is a much younger version of Mike Pelfrey, maybe even better stuff. Someone's going to give Kyle Gibson a chance if the Twins cut him loose. So let's hope that that's not the case if he's going to continue to pitch like this. Now, with that said, he still has an ERA, let's see, 5.76. So it's not over 6 at this point, but it's been threatening 6 for pretty much the entire season. So I don't know that anybody is feeling like Kyle Gibson is here to stay. 8 strikeouts and a walk, 1 earned run. But again, we have to be aware or cognizant of the fact that he was facing a very, very depleted White Sox offense. Yohan Moncada is a nice player. Jose Abreu is a nice player. Nicky Delmonico is pretty interesting, but frankly, it's still an offense that's in the bottom half of the league, maybe even the bottom 1/3. So you don't want to get too excited or too wound up about the fact that Kyle Gibson shut that offense down. It was a shot in the arm when it was desperately needed, especially with all the doubleheaders recently, and the fact that Dylan G as a long guy was no longer available, or at least in that role. And so Tyler Duffy working 3 innings for the save on Monday night in the second game. They needed a long start out of Gibson tonight, and so he delivered. Very, very nice job. And again, you can't overemphasize that. With that said, it has been something the Twins have been in search of all season long, and he has not been able to deliver on. So, again, I'm not getting too terribly excited about Kyle Gibson, but for one night, he did at least enough to keep his rotation spot secure. I have to believe, though, that Aaron Slegers is knocking on the door. A fellow tall pitcher, ground ball guy who might be able to do what they had hoped Gibson would be able to do, which is just, frankly, be competent, which, again, I love Kyle Gibson as a dude, really nice guy, really nice person, really smart guy, just has not been able to execute. So, who knows, maybe he can turn a corner here. Pretty quiet offensive night for the Twins, 6 hits, no Twin with more than 1 hit, although Jorge Polanco, Kenny Vargas, and Eddie Rosario all with home runs. I, of course, take a bit of pride in the Rosario home run just based on the fact that I've been writing about Rosario for most of the season. But the Twins made the most out of their hits tonight, and not much in the way of walks, 5 strikeouts and a walk. So a lot of balls in play for the Twins, not much to show for it. Lucas Giolito was all right. Obviously, the home run to Vargas on an 0-2 pitch, you really can't have that. And that's the difference in execution between a guy who's been in the big leagues for a long time and a rookie who's still trying to find his way and has a 4.40 ERA in the PCL. So, again, Giolito I still believe in and think that he's going to be a fairly interesting arm moving forward, but has had a really rough go of it. Again, not as rough as Braden Shipley, who the Twins faced the other day, but a pretty rough go of it in the PCL. So, we'll see what Giolito has to offer the White Sox the rest of the way. But for a White Sox team that has packed it in, it's not surprising that they're going to guys like Giolito, Reynaldo Lopez, and those types of players, moving away from the Pelfreys and so on of the world and the Derek Hollands, because at some point you have to just kind of look at the future and go from there. So at this point we can kind of open it up for questions if people want to send them on Twitter, and we'll go from there. Yeah. I see Twins fan 44, Kopech, and Dean Dunning. So a couple other pitchers that are really interesting in the Chicago White Sox system who have come over in various trades. And so, yeah, there's plenty of intriguing pitching in the White Sox organization. The trouble is that raw pitching talent takes possibly a very, very long time to get to the big leagues. I see Anthony Kokakis asking, does Glenn Perkins have a short leash? He should. I assume that means on his roster spot, and I suspect he does not. But with that said, we're almost to September 1st anyway, so I don't particularly think it's going to be a big deal. They've been going with the longer bullpen to protect a lot of pitchers. With that said, I do agree, though, that they can't really put Perkins out there in any sort of situations where he can be an obvious liability, and that is a really difficult spot to be in. You don't want to be in charge of a 25-man roster that's essentially a 24-man roster. It's almost like having a Rule 5 guy, and that's really not what you sign up for when you're a manager in a pennant race or granted a playoff spot. So I think it's beneficial that September is coming close, but man, you really do need Perkins to show something to justify his roster spot down the stretch. Again, they're not going to designate him for assignment or anything like that, and if they really push came to shove, they could put him on the DL and go from there. But yeah, I hope to see more from him moving forward. I see Kyle Master asking if the Twins will take a flyer on Trevor Plouffe. Trevor Plouffe, designated for assignment by the Tampa Bay Rays tonight, has been a really rough season for Plouffe, but he has done, I don't want to say an acceptable job of hitting lefties this year, But I think last time I checked, he had like a 345 on base. He just had no power whatsoever. And so he's getting on base. He's basically doing Trevor Plouffe stuff to left-handed pitchers without the power. And again, that's not terribly beneficial to an offense. And that's why you've seen him get designated by both the A's and the Rays. Kind of funny rhyme there. But yeah, I don't know that the Twins will take a stab at him. Maybe if it gets to September and they still need a bat, but honestly, I don't see it. I think, and this is an interesting point that Mike Berdino made last week on Midwest Swing, there is probably a tendency for these guys to distance themselves a little bit from former Twins, whether it's right or wrong. When I brought up Liam Hendriks as a guy I thought the Twins should target in August during the post-waiver deadline, or the waiver trade deadline, Mike said, as much as it might make sense to buy low on him, they probably will try to distance themselves from the former Twins just to be a different type of leadership group than maybe Terry Ryan and company were beforehand. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens. I did see someone ask when Steven Gonsalves will be called up. Frankly, I'm not sure it'll be this year, but it's possible. I mean, there's still some room on the 40-man roster. Buddy Boshiers could probably be designated without too much trouble. They do have a couple other guys they could designate to bring up Gonsalves. I don't know. A lot's going to depend on Dylan G and how he pitches moving forward, the health of Adalberto Mejia, Kyle Gibson moving forward. So I would say those three things are fairly big question marks. You got Aaron Slegers in the mix, who at least deserves another look. I think there's a chance Gonsalves could start for the Twins in September sometime, but I don't think that it's terribly likely. As much as adding him to the 40-man roster is an appealing proposition to fans, I do think that Falvey and Levine want to maintain that 40-man flexibility as long as possible, and I understand that. With that said, though, if the hook was going to be this fast on Tim Melville, I'm not really sure I understand giving him the start in the first place, so I don't know. Alex Lundstrom says, is Felix Jorge going to be back up in September? Will Fernando Romero get a cup of coffee? I wrote about that for zone coverage on Monday, and I didn't have either of those guys on my list. I think Romero is going to hit an innings cap, whether it's an official or an unofficial one. He is a Tommy John surgery survivor, so I don't know that they're going to go particularly long innings-wise for Romero. As for Jorge, who was promoted to Rochester officially, that was posted today by Seth Stills of TwinsDaily.com. They could give Jorge another look. He could give them some depth in the rotation. I did not have him listed as someone... Sorry, Alex, I'm not trying to call you out for not reading. I did not have Jorge on my list, but I go either way on him. He's looked, I think, fairly good recently in terms of starts at Chattanooga, but he is, like Anthony Kokakis says, maybe not particularly exciting. My guy from Baseball HQ, Chris Blessing, who I was talking to about Jorge before, was that Felix Jorge was fairly well developed 3-4 years ago physically, and just has not had room for much projection since then. And he just has not grown, has not gotten much further than that, and that's just because he's a thin guy, not particularly tall. So there's not a lot of room to grow healthy-wise, or in a healthy form or fashion to, figure out, ways to get better. So I don't know if Jorge will be up, but if it is, it's, I don't think, going to be out of the rotation. I did see a question about possibly trading Nick Gordon and then filling in at shortstop with the likes of, I think it said, some of the other guys in the organization, whether it's Polanco, Escobar, Adrianza. I did see Vielma listed. I think Vielma gets taken off the 40-man roster here, perhaps even, fairly soon. His offensive season has been absolutely disastrous at Rochester. Last I saw, it was like a 4-something OPS. Just does not have any power in his bat whatsoever, and I just don't know that that they're gonna keep him on the 40-man roster. He is a Terry Ryan era guy, and so I just don't think that Vielma survives. I think Adrianza gives you everything you could want from Vielma, and I think it's it's just the sun setting on Vielma as a project for the Twins. If so he goes somewhere else and picks it and becomes the next Pedro Florimon, that's fine. He can lead off for the Phillies in 10 years if that's the case. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. I did see a question from Twins Anonymous asking when people are back, Miguel Sano, Max Kepler. Could the Twins bat Brian Dozier third? I think it's an interesting proposition and one that I've been talking about at points this year. It depends on facing lefty, facing righty. I do see a take from Caleb saying Buxton should lead off. I'm not sure I want Buxton to lead off, at least not against righties. Against lefties, I'd have him probably lead off. Good on base percentage. He sees the ball well out of the hands of left-handed pitchers. With that said, when everybody's healthy, Robbie Grossman could lead off, Joe Mauer could lead off, and you could have Dozier hit third to drive in a few more runs. I don't know how that process would change in terms of how much it would actually matter, because you'd also be, subtracting some at-bats from Dozier over the course of the season. Based on my independent research, each lineup spot that you drop a player costs them roughly 12 to 15 plate appearances per year. Not a great deal, about, let's see, 1 every 10 games. So not that big of a deal, but I do think if you are going to drop Dozier down, it's probably going to help drive in more runs and get this offense going more. Dozier batting third and then Sano batting fourth. I don't know who you hit in front of that. I would say Mauer and Kepler, Mauer and Grossman, Grossman and Kepler. Against lefties, you might want to do Polanco, Buxton. They have a lot of guys who could, in theory, hit leadoff and do some of the things that Dozier does that would allow Dozier to do more run producer kinds of things in the number 3 spot. So I would not have any issue with batting Dozier third and Sano fourth. You have to get kind of creative as far as if they're facing lefties or righties in front of those guys. But again, I don't hate the idea whatsoever. So I think I would definitely hit Dozier third moving forward. Jimmy Dosen wants to know, do you see the Twins picking up an arm or Sano insurance before the end of the month? I think an arm is more likely. I think they could justify adding a bullpen arm or a starter if they really, really felt like it. But you would need somebody intriguing to clear waivers. Marco Estrada, or get to the Twins on waivers at least. Estrada claimed by the Yankees. Deal falls through. He's probably being blocked by somebody else because the Yankees have a fairly full rotation. And Scott Feldman underwent season-ending knee surgery today. He would have been also an intriguing option as far as pitchers for the Twins. So it is getting to be very, very sparse as far as pitchers who could clear waivers and help the Twins at this point. So I think if they maybe get their hands on a reliever, the names I keep coming back to are guys like Blake Wood. I love Liam Hendricks in that role, so I don't know. We'll see what happens. The trouble is you need those guys to clear waivers and get to you. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if they go down that road or if they stay inside, in-house. The reports that I'm getting on Curtis are possible closer type stuff, and probably more like second division closer, though. Probably more like very solid setup man. So if they can fix the bullpen in-house, that's the way to go. Not only from a cost standpoint, but from a stability standpoint, because it's just, when you bring up a guy from the minors, you know everything about them, you know their backstory, you know what makes them tick and all that. And plus, you're not spending $6 million on a left-handed specialist like Tony Sipp or Antonio Bastardo. So I really do think that I would go internal for another pitcher at this point and just keep doing that. And so we'll see, if the Twins continue to do that. I did see someone bring up the Miguel Sano weight question. I did address that on Midwest Swing today. We had Matt Trueblood on from Baseball America. Tom and I addressed that question after the fact. I do want you all to go back and listen. It's towards the last 10 minutes of an hour-long podcast, but I will tell you guys that I'll basically give you the gist of what I said. If you all promise me, you'll go back and click. How does that sound? Here's what I think about the Miguel Sano comments. I think Jim Souhan had a legitimate source of information, someone who tells him that the Twins may be worried about Miguel Sano's weight. I think that's a legitimate gripe. I think that if the Twins are worried about that, it's possibly legitimate. I think that, understanding that as a 23-year-old man, your body can do things physically with more weight on it than you can when you're 28, 29. So from a process of, taking care of yourself when you are young, you need to start that process and know how to keep yourself at a healthy body weight. What I don't think that Souhan did properly was this. He couched it insufficiently within an injury that had nothing to do with being overweight. Miguel Sano did not foul a baseball off his shin because he was overweight. Miguel Sano is not on the disabled list because he's overweight. And he also filed this column while the Twins are in an airplane going to Chicago. I just feel like that's a little bit of dodgy, getting away from the team, not having to be accountable in front of the team, even if you only come once a homestand or twice a homestand. And Jim's at the park semi-frequently, but certainly not every game. So I think he may have had a point, but I just don't think he put it together in a way that was really fair to Miguel Sano as a person, as a player. Again, if Miguel Sano wasn't hurt, wasn't playing poorly since the break, and the team wasn't going on the road, if any one of those things was not true, I think it looks better. If Miguel Sano's hitting the ball well and he brings up Miguel Sano's weight, maybe it doesn't fly as well as far as people are like, why are you bringing that up? Why all the negativity when he's playing well? So it's a tough situation to deal with. It's a tough situation to come at from a columnist standpoint. But then you have to ask yourself, why is this source telling Jim to run it through the media? Can't they talk to Miguel directly? Why does that have to get out there in the first place? So I do have some questions about everybody involved. I do think Miguel could do a better job of taking care of himself if there's a legit concern about that. I don't know that there is. I don't know that there isn't, because honestly, I don't know enough about that part of baseball. So I don't know. Personally, I do think, again, if he takes better care of himself, everybody will benefit from that. He'll be very well compensated. He'll have the best possible career that he can. And there is no question that there is not a strong precedent for guys playing at 260 pounds in their age 23, 24 seasons. Look at Miguel Cabrera as a young player. Much smaller guy, has gotten bigger as he's gone on. He's had some nagging injuries. From a preventative standpoint, I think there's a point to be made here. Again, with that said, though, I do not think that it was done in a manner that was necessarily professional or even just, cogent. I don't think the point was put together in a way and presented in a way that a professional columnist should do it. So, if I'm running the fence, I get it. I just think that I think it could have been said much better off. That would, it just came at a very disconcerting time for me that take was put out there. So again, I have a lot of respect for Jim as someone who he's treated me very well as a reporter. He's taught me some things and he's very good to me. He talks to me and all that stuff. But I didn't appreciate that article. I didn't think it was written in a way that was what he was trying to do or what he had hoped to put out there and how it would be received. And I do think that that's on the person who writes it. How the message is perceived falls back on the writer and how they present it. And of course, I do think reputation that precedes someone is going to cloud that vision as well. So again, I think that he could have done a better job, but I don't know. Let's see. Brad Simon wants to know, does Paul Molitor go if the Twins make the wild card? And if he does go, will the Twins still keep James Rowson? I don't have a good answer for that. I think the writing's on the wall with the fact that Paul Molitor managed out the string on a one-year deal as kind of a lame duck. I really do think that they probably would like to replace him, but also felt obligated to honor his contract and give him a chance to show what he's capable of in a new system. But with that said, with all the changes that we've seen made to this point, I don't get a strong read one way or the other. I'm not going to try to break any news here. But if I had to guess, I feel like they would have a new manager in place next season. I do think, however, that James Rowson would be part of that new manager's coaching staff. I hope that he and Jeff Pickler would be holdovers, of course, because I think they're two of the best coaches the team has. Rowson gets rave reviews from his players. He gets rave reviews from all kinds of people that you talk to in the Yankees organization. Aaron Judge, I got some quotes from Aaron Judge that raved about how Rowson taught him coming up in the minors. And it was basically what it was this. Rowson said to Judge, I'm not going to manage you to hit, or I'm not going to teach you to hit 300 in the minors. I'm going to teach you to be a monster in the big leagues. We're going to get you to the big leagues and crush. That doesn't mean you're going to hit 300 in the minors and learn how to hit minor league pitching. We're going to get you to where you can crush big league pitching while we're working together in the minor leagues. I think that's brilliant from a coach's standpoint in the minors about player development. And I think that's the exact mindset that he has gone to with guys like Eddie Rosario, who he has turned into obviously a very capable hitter. You've seen even Brian Dozier hitting the low ball better this year, as Parker Hageman of Twins Daily pointed out, I believe today or maybe it was yesterday. So I think you have to keep Rowson. I think you have to keep Pickler. I would say there's a non-zero chance Pickler is in the mix to be the next manager. So I don't know. Again, the name I keep coming back to is Sandy Alomar Jr. You've got the catcher factor. You've got the Falvey factor. You've got the Hispanic factor. You've got the former, he's finished high up in some of these previous managerial interviews that he's done. There's just a lot of things in his favor. The MLB pedigree, obviously his dad managing, Roberto as his brother in the Hall of Fame. That's the name I keep coming back to, and I'm not saying I have any inside info. Another name I hear is Ron Washington, who's got the Texas factor as well, and was also with the Twins briefly, I think, in '87. He was a big Kirby Puckett, one of Kirby Puckett's best friends back then. So, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see because, it's anytime they make a change, and they've been making some very significant changes lately, not only with scouts, but other front office types, it just makes you feel like they're really committed to doing whatever it takes to make this a successful team. And it doesn't mean that they're going to make moves that everyone's comfortable with. And I think as fans, we kind of expect that, as far as fans, people that are not involved in the organization specifically, kind of have come to expect a team that doesn't always make the unpopular decision. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens here. But it's going to be interesting to track here in the offseason as far as where the Twins go managerial-wise. And as far as player movement, it's going to be, again, another full offseason with these new guys. So we'll see what happens. All right, guys, that's all I got for you. Peace. Be well, and I will have a Brian Dozier interview up tomorrow for Midwest Swing. Thanks for joining us.